Do you understand the distinction I'm
Yes,
trying to make?
I've always understood it.
Okay.
And I also know that it's very hard in certain jobs because honestly, in law enforcement, you are technically on the job 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 a year. So it's very hard to extricate yourself from that mentality for some people.
Yeah.
It is difficult because some people feel that they're on all the time.
Let's see if we can agree on this. Racism is a learned response. So if we break that mold of misinformation, we can possibly break the culture. But understand this also. If we believe that slavery ended after 1864, then we had another 100 years of Jim Crow up until maybe 64, 65. Again, if you believe it ended, how long you been free? So you're going to take a system that's been in place for 500 years and all of a sudden you're a good guy?
I don't think you're free yet.
Well, you get my point.
Right, but that's my thing. Well, I'll say this, because I had started doing some reviewing in regards to police forces and how they came into existence. And for people that don't know, a lot of the original police forces were the old slave catchers.
Fugitive slave owners.
And so if that's how this started in Chicago in particular, you had a huge contingency of Irish people, and I'm not saying that Irish people are any more, any less, anything than anyone else, but you had a huge contingency of Irish people that wound up being police officers. And let's tell the truth here, because that's what we're going to do. Sometimes when you are beaten down, sometimes you look for someone else to beat down.
Oh, no question
That's
about
absolutely
it.
true.
And so you had the Irish who were being looked at as less than compared to the WASPs that were here. And then you had them looking down on certain other minorities. And you had that culture. Now, black people started coming on the force, and Hispanic people, and even Asian people, and women.
Right.
But you still have, to me, a mentality that even if I don't buy into how you think, I'm going to be quiet about it because I still have to work with you.
Exactly.
And that is where it gets to be difficult, because I don't want to be on the street and make a radio call because somebody's shooting and nobody responds.
That's generally the thought, yes.
Yeah.
And so when we're talking about altering the culture, because I don't know the percentages, and perhaps you all do, what is the breakdown, ethnically speaking, of the Chicago Police Department? Do we know, percentage-wise, of the officers, of just of the average officer, not anybody in management?
Right now, around 23% are black officers, which 10 years ago was higher. While I was a police officer, it approached 30%.
Right.
Yeah, and it's been decreasing ever since. Latinos make up, I think, about 18% now, and the rest are basically white, with Asians making up, being grouped all together and making up a few percentage points.
Okay. And so you have still, I mean, we're close to a quarter, but like I said, we've been decreasing. And then you have maybe, like I said, less than another 20% that are Hispanic and Asian. So we still have a majority Caucasian force in a city that is not majority Caucasian, because it's, according to the statistics I just saw, a third, basically black, white, and Hispanic. And you've got a slant of Asians and a slant of Middle Easterners and other ethnicities. But the majority population here is a third. Is there a way that I can be racist at my house and call folks all kinds of names, but I can be trained to subdue that while I'm on the job?
Certainly.
Yeah, I know some who do, who have.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's, again, you don't want to use the wide paintbrush on this, because, and I'll say this, I know a lot of good police officers of other ethnicities.
Sure.
Again, going back to a comment that Harlem had said, again, I've seen some black ones just as bad as some of the baddest white ones.
What did I say?
Here's where I think, what I think is going to happen with this DOJ thing is that they're going to come in and going to hammer middle management. In other words, the sergeants are going to take the brunt of this cleansing.
Instead of the baseline.
Well, no, I think, again, if you have a guy that's leading the charge and he's messed up, Everybody else is messed up.
Okay.
So, in my minuscule mind, in my Lilliputian mind, redo. Here's what I would start. I would start with reviewing the promotional process.
Yes.
In my 30 some odd years on this job, I've never, the fairest test we ever had was the detective exam because it was held in-house. Everything else was outsourced. So that meant that, for instance, we had a deputy who had 5 people who scored sequentially 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now I talked to a professor who said that's almost impossible. Impossible. But now these guys are the leader amongst leaders. They're the men amongst men. And then you have what's called a merit. You got people that get mad because so-and-so gets merit. I was. And I think I did my job well. However, for those people who paint the brush with, oh, look, he's so much smarter. Well, how did he become so smart? Because last time I talked to him, he couldn't chew bubble gum. You know, you got guys wearing loafers because they can't tie their shoes. But now they're the leaders. If you read some of their reports, it would scare you.
Yeah.
Absolutely horrible. I think I told you about the one guy who's a commander, wrote a 1-line homicide report, the only one I ever saw in my career. He dead. It was a female, so it was an incomplete thought. She dead.
Right. We couldn't even get the basics out.
This guy's now a commander.
Yeah.
Well,
And
go on.
this Commander Glenn Evans, I'm naming names tonight.
Oh.
Okay.
Well, you know, I don't have a problem with it. Go ahead.
Now, McCarthy stood up for him when he did something, again, I think was reprehensible, putting his gun in the mouth of a suspect. Well, I've been observing this guy for years from afar, and I knew something was wrong with him when he was a patrolman. And I watched him become a sergeant, a lieutenant, get the captain, commander. And I'm saying, what the hell can I...
H-E double hockey sticks.
What are these people thinking who are in charge? And I just shook my head.
Do you still have in your department what they accuse a lot of agencies of having, which is the nepotism?
Oh, yeah.
Please.
Oh, yeah.
So that plays into it, as well as political cronyism.
Mm-hmm.
That plays into it.
And cronyism inside the department also, because I knew your dad and...
Okay, because
That type
a
of thing.
lot of police officers are multi-generational.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's a family business, if you want to say it like that. So here's another question that was posed to me, and I just have to spit it out. My girlfriend at work asked me, how are you a good officer if you watch someone do something bad and you say nothing? Do you still qualify as a good officer?
You want to? No, absolutely not.
No.
Okay.
No. But I think the question she's asking, or that you're trying to get to, is what do you do?
To as a good officer.
Yeah. There's, again, because the way this department's set up, oh, they're going to hammer you. You can believe that. But you have to do something.
Mm-hmm.
I don't agree that you turn a blind eye. I mean, there are a lot of police officers that never turn a blind eye, and they've been hammered for it, or they've stayed at a certain level. Now, when you talk about the multi-generational, because I am, but I had one of my bosses tell me that they had a grandfather in the Great Chicago Fire, and there'll always be one of his family members on the job. So what do you think that's going to happen with that?
I would say, what year was that?
Yeah.
That was in the 1800s, wasn't it?
1874.
Oh my goodness.
Right.
Okay.
So
1871,
they've been on the city payroll since then, and there's always going to be one.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't necessarily make them bad. However, the policies that once they get into a position of power that they enact or fail to enact make them a bad player in the game, if that makes sense.
Let me ask you this. Because I read something on one of your posts today, and it was a young man. I read it, and I'm going to tell it. Antonio, was his name Antonio? I can't remember his last name.
Tillman.
But he wrote about how you were instrumental in his A, staying the course, and B, how he views officers that he encounters now. And both of those being positive. As officers, and I'm dealing specifically with black ones now, what needs to be done in our community, which is where most of us work, to make that difference. Because I have a friend whose husband grew up and was told, hey, you see the police, you don't say anything, because they were already deemed as someone that you didn't necessarily trust. Now, I wasn't raised like that. But how do we, in what we look at now as a big group of folks that don't seem to trust the police, how do we as black law enforcement get the trust back in the game between at least us and our own people?
Oh, I could. You want this ball to hit out the park, or shall I? Let me say this.
Go ahead, Joe.
Two things have to happen. First of all, we've got to get rid of the stereotypes of the step and fetches. We got to quit being those guys on TV that are corrupted, misogynistic, thieving.
For those of you that don't know what misogynistic means, that means you don't like women. Go ahead.
They portray us in every negative light that you can. We have got to fight back with a real image of what we do. We live here. We're fathers, we're mothers, we're parents, we're uncles, sisters, brothers, whatever else. We pay taxes, for God's sakes. I went to a Best Buy and they followed me. I got this big star on my neck and I'm like, what are you doing?
You look suspect.
I look suspect. I know I'm old and fat, but I look suspect.
You were shopping
Suspect.
while
Shopping while black. Now, this person didn't know I had as many guns as they did.
Maybe more.
Maybe more, maybe not. But my point to you is that this is 2015 and we're still fighting those issues from 1964. The same police brutality issues, the same issues of housing. We don't get it. And unless we start getting it, they're going to get us out of here.
Because I do know that Chicago's population is dropping.
Yes. And the black population.
And there's now I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but there is something going on, because Joe and my mom live in the 7th Ward, for example. Marcel and I live in the 8th Ward, which is just west of the 7th. And I'm watching how they've allowed east of Yates and 79th Street and North just go to pot.
Yep.
But some of those properties are quietly being bought up.
I think we talked about this.
And we talked about this. And so when you have a situation where it is a plan, because see, and I'm going to say this, people, and you can be mad if you want, some black people plan for Saturday night. There are other cultures that are planning for 20 years out.
I'd say
and
so.
there are other cultures that are planning 5 generations out. And so because we're not looking at the big picture, there are other things that are happening here, because those that are running for fear, they're afraid of the black shooters, they're afraid of police shooters. You're leaving the community and someone else is coming in. And once this transformation is complete, you won't be able to come back into Chicago.
Well, it's kind of like rights. If you let someone take away your rights, they're not going to give it back to you willingly.
They're not going to give it back to you.
Well, I was trying to be
Period.
polite. I was trying to be
No,
polite.
that's the truth of it, because once I feel like I've overpowered you and I've overthought you, I've overplanned you, I'm not going to give you anything.
No. And you're
And you're going to have to be darn bad to come back and take it.
I was looking at a report today. I'm trying to remember the site, but they said in 2013 they had an influx of 6,500 people and an exodus of almost that plus. So it was a net loss of like 1%, 2%. But that's a lot of people. If you got 600 moving in, 500 moving out, that's a statement.
Yeah.
Now, again, we start looking at these other issues that go along with, and everything ties in. Believe it or not, everything's going to tie into this whole policing issue. Budgets. The first thing they cut whenever there's a budget what they do is they cut training. Now, what are they talking about doing with all these police from now? They want to train them. Well, where's the money coming from? Where? I mean, you want to put body cams all of a sudden. Oh, now it's a big thing.
But where's the money?
Where's the money?
Well, here's my question also, because I saw a lot of the protesters and read a lot of the information. And one of the statements that was made was that between 2005 and 2015, there were $500 million spent on police lawsuits. Lawsuits brought against the police. And I know I learned this through American Family. Sometimes it's cheaper to settle than to fight. I get that. I get there are percentage of cases it's just not worth the effort to fight. You'll pay more for the lawyers to go to court than you would for whatever the requested fee is. But I'm not $500 million worth. No, I don't think so.
Here, again, what are they going to talk about? It's training. But let me go back to McDonald for a second. In this article from Fran Spellman, she says that the family got $5 million. The lawyers got 1.8 and never filed a suit.
Yeah.
Yes.
Unheard of. I mean, I wish I could hit the lotto.
Yes.
Unheard of. They did. I mean, if you think of it, and let me be very base about this, they did absolutely nothing and walked off with 1.8 million off the back of this young man.
Yes.
Now, I won't go into this, but I will say this. These so-called leaders tell you they were misled, but they vote for a budget and don't tell you nothing and tell you to accept it. There's a problem.
Now we're going to have to close out in a minute, but I want to leave the viewers with an understanding. Number one, I don't care the ethnicity of an officer. Not all officers are bad. I don't care the ethnicity of an officer. Not all officers are good. So I don't care the gender of an officer. Not all genders are bad. I don't care the gender of an officer. Not all genders are good. But here's the thing. If you have a situation where Chicago Police Department is facing serious scrutiny now, which has been not seen before on this level for us, not Department of Justice type scrutiny. Before it got to this level, because someone just commented, do you think more diversity is the answer? What is the answer to deal with the police problems that the community perceives exist?
It's a multifaceted answer. Diversity definitely would help. Better training would help. Better leadership would help. All of these things are part of the answer. And more participation by the public. Pay attention to who you elect. Get involved with these elections because it makes a difference. Keep in mind, this cover-up, and that's what it is, a cover-up concerning the McDonald shooting, happened because the people of Chicago elected Rahm Emanuel. So again, if you all out there who voted for him, those leaders who supported him, you all are the reason we have him. And guess what? Everybody makes mistakes. Now you get a chance to correct it with the coming elections in March, with the mayoral elections a few years from now. But all of those things are part of the answer. More involvement, more voting, scrutinize your leaders closer, better training for police officers, definitely more diversity. These are things that have to be done to even begin talking about solving this problem.
I want to ask something else. It was alleged that the murderer of Laquan McDonald had 18 complaints prior. I think it was 18.
Yeah.
At a point, see, because I'm gonna tell you, they've been trying to run me out the county for years.
I wonder why.
I can't hear one complaint is not gonna be a problem. I'm not saying that every complaint is legitimate. You have people that complain because that's what they do or whatever, their mental illness, all of that. But not every complaint is illegitimate also. At a point, when do you say, okay, there's something going on with this particular officer, and we need to have a closer look at his psychological state. We may need to take him off the job. Maybe he can be a 911 dispatch, something.
I think, again, having not enough time to explain to you the workings of the department, it's all going to fall back to one person. It's going to be that sergeant. Because the sergeant has to investigate that complaint. It goes back up the chain, but it starts with the sergeant.
Okay.
So if you don't have the frontline supervisor up and running or up to par, then you're going to have subpar investigations. The best way I can put it is this. It's hard to lead a charge from behind.
Huh.
That's not leadership.
No,
That is absolutely
that's
not
riding in the
leadership.
back with the boys.
Bingo. So if I tell you, someone asks, how do you stop a rogue cop? Two ways. There's two ways you can do it. A, call the state's attorney. Do that. Always call internal affairs. If he's a rogue cop, they'll get him. I mean, I hope.
Here's another question I have for you. For those that are just regular old community people, let's say I wasn't a probation officer. This would be what I did, all the time. So I'm just a regular old radio host. So I don't know too much about law enforcement and policies and procedures, etc. What do I do? Because I get tired of us complaining and not offering up a solution or being willing to step into the program and the process. What do I do to say, I want to make my community safer? I don't know how to do that, but I know the police are here to supposedly help me do that. What do I do?
I would tell you, this is going to really sound crazy, but you got to get with an organization of some type. Because one person singing in a pew is different than 6 people singing in a pew.
Okay.
So when we have a chorus going, and again, it mirrors some that Mr. Hardeman said, once we have that chorus going, people start to listen to you. Mm-hmm. Because now you got an audience. You can't go north and do some of the things they do over here. You can't go in Bridgeport in some areas and sell dope on the corners like they do in our neighborhoods. You can't go in certain areas and fire a gun without getting beat up.
You can't sell loose cigarettes.
Oh, loose, right.
You're not selling loose cigarettes.
Or green meat. But that's
right.
That's a...
Well, and you're right, because many, many, many years ago, when the 7th Ward was actually where we live, was I think part of the 10th Ward.
Right.
Verdoliak was our alderman, and there was not a stop sign on the corner of Paxton. And so, they whiz by that intersection even now with the stop sign. It's gotten a little better. But my dad went by himself and got the brush off to speak to the alderman, because I guess that's a part of their responsibilities to assess the situation as far as traffic dangers. Well, he went back and sat down with the neighbors. And so then they came back as the block club.
There you go.
And they got a stop sign.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So let's recap. Number 1. Being a black officer doesn't make you a good officer or a bad officer. It makes you an officer.
Yep.
Yeah.
Being a white officer doesn't make you a good officer or a bad officer. It makes you an officer. Hispanic, Asian, female, it doesn't make you a good or a bad officer. It makes you an officer. What you choose to do is what you choose to do.
I would say this. I would add that if you care, and I've been fortunate to work with some of the most caring officers around, of all ethnicities. One guy we used to call the second deputy, patrolman, made sergeant, crazy as a road lizard. But I never saw this guy, and he's white, I never saw him mistreat any person because of their ethnicity. Now, if you were a butthead, you got what you got.
And some of us are buttheads.
Well,
some of us are buttheads.
Yeah.
But we have to get involved
yes.
with, if not your political organization in your neighborhood, some type of social civic organization that is still going to deal with these type of issues. We have to understand that if we see something that we feel uncomfortable with, firstly, whip out your phone with your videos, so everybody has one, contact Internal Affairs and the State's Attorney's Office, and don't just do that and walk away. You keep contacting until something is done.
Could I add one thing?
Yes.
The one thing
sir.
that's been bothering me. Again, I want you to look at, I want every listener to think about this. This mayor has had 4 different people in charge of different positions. There 4 different positions that left. Let's not even talk about Broussard, but let's talk about Barbara Burton Bennett. Let's talk about the guy that fled to Pakistan. What was the other one? But again, we're talking about malfeasance. If this had been a private entity, he would have lost his job.
Yeah. He's making bad choices.
At least 6 of his top heads of departments have left. This guy that just left
and gone to prison.
Yeah, exactly.
Ando left. Now here's a guy again, and here's what's insulting. At least for me, I don't know about anyone else. He ran on the idea of bringing transparency and good government to Chicago, and he was going to bring. If you look at his record, he said he was going to bring people from here. He hasn't hired anybody from Chicago that I know.
Mm-hmm.
To do anything of any major.
Well, Cheryl, I mean, the one girl at the Chancellor of City Colleges, but she's not in that's like saying, oh, look at all these cabinet levels. She's not a cabinet level.
Mm-mm.
You know, his vice mayor is a nice guy, but again, he's not elected. I can appoint you to that title.
Okay.
But if this had been a private entity, he'd be gone.
We have a question up here now. We're having an extended show because Setting It Off is not being aired today, so we are going to be able to air a little bit longer. And the question is, why are there less black officers? Now, Marcel, you brought that up.
Yeah.
So now you have to answer.
Well,
What happened to the numbers?
I think, one, there are fewer black people trying to become police officers. That's only a small portion of it. I think during these background checks and these psychological exams and all those things, that they're finding reasons to disqualify, I think, qualified black people who want to be police officers. It amazes me that 25 years ago, we had more black police officers than we do now. That doesn't make sense to me. That goes against the grain of common sense. Things are supposed to get better, not worse. But basically, I think the screening process has a lot to do with it. Also, they're not replacing officers either. And when they do replace officers, they're not bringing in black officers. Most of the black officers who made up that 30-odd% of the department are retiring. They're leaving now, and it's happening at a faster rate. I just think the whole testing and screening process needs to be looked at really, really carefully. I was taught at the academy for almost 5 years, and I could see it every year. There were fewer and fewer black candidates, and I couldn't explain it. While at the same time, we were seeing more Latino candidates. I'm not sure what's going on. All I know is that when we had a black mayor, we seemed to find plenty of people to be police officers and who were qualified. And now, after a number of years under Daley 2 and now Rahm 1, the Rahm father, we are seeing this we're seeing this police department become more white.
And that's what it is.
Yeah, and just say it plain, it's becoming more white. And McCarthy, what I noticed is he had a revolving door in terms of leadership in his department, and key positions seem to be going to white members more and more, and getting rid of him was the best thing they could have done. Now all of a sudden, we've got this crazy police union head who, during the whole McCarthy's tenure, said that they didn't want him. And then when he's gone, they're upset that he's gone. The FOP is a problem too. That's probably for another show, but they're definitely a problem in what they do and what they say.
And how they represent.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, the other big question of the night, do we feel that it is necessary to have a black replacement of McCarthy?
No.
For this to be better? No. Well, that was quick. I didn't even get the rest of the question out. Okay, no.
Can I say this?
Yes.
I'm for anybody that is qualified, that has something that comes from within, that has the moxie. If you look at the history of this department, when we really saw change the first time, really only time, was O.W. Wilson. Mm-hmm. And O.W. was brought in because of this kind of a situation. Now, does history repeat itself? Yes, and it repeats itself because we don't listen to history. This is nothing new. Like I said when I started the program off, this DOJ thing has been coming for 50 years. It has nothing to do with the current crop of policemen. It has to do with how this culture has inculcated itself and how it's replicated itself and how it's going to replicate itself until we take out the titular heads and those dynamics that let it grow. Again, a lot of great officers, but is there two separate systems? Yes. I had a friend, you've seen her at my house. She did something less than honorable. The police surrounded her house. Surrounded it. Had lights going, scared the stuffings out of her grandbaby for something that they didn't do to other officers. Now, I'm not going to say that she was right in what she did, but I'll just say the application is not just and fair.
Right.
And that's where
equitable.
And that's where the problem comes in with the department.
Do you feel, since we're saying that it does not have to be necessarily a black person, do you feel it has to be someone who's worked as a Chicago police officer?
I do.
Now I disagree, respectfully. If they find the right person and they're from outside of Chicago, and that's the key part, is it the right person? I don't think it has to be someone that's been a police officer, but in Chicago, but that wouldn't hurt. But if there's a better qualified person who can make these type of changes and they're from the outside.
Wait, I question that only because I remember Jody hiding behind that car downtown.
I got it
on
right.
July.
Thank God for cameras.
Yeah, that has never left my mind, and I've never seen someone from outside of Chicago do so well in past history.
Let me say this: if they can find someone that's not in this current command group, especially.
Okay.
Maybe they'd have to
someone
find
that's outside of this culture. That's the problem.
Maybe there's a lieutenant somewhere who can do it.
Don't choke on the joke. Don't choke on it.
Okay.
Look. But that's horse pocket. But look, there are patrolmen out there that we both know of. The sergeants out there, the lieutenants. I mean, there's a whole cadre. If it was fair.
Yeah.
If it was fair. You look at the current crop. 2 weeks ago, numbers came to me that we only had in the city of Chicago 11 black lieutenants. When I came in, it was 76.
Mm-hmm, that's what I'm talking
In the detective division right now, as I spoke, or as we're speaking, there are no black lieutenants. Now, does that make the investigation go east, west, north, or south? Well, it certainly plays into one's purview.
It has the appearance of impropriety.
It does.
Yeah.
Especially when you're talking about that we're 26%, if these numbers are correct. So even at that, we could find there are enough people here that could handle this job. And I'll tell you why. Yeah. Because they will know what's wrong. You let a guy that's been beat, he'll tell you who's the one whipping him. Mm-hmm. You let the person or that woman, that man, that whomever, because two things are going to happen. If you put in a guy or a person or female either, all of them, they're going to hopefully surround themselves with the light thought people who are going to know, hey, this guy didn't do it, this guy won't do it, they will.
Okay. Now I'm going to give you both a chance to make a closing statement, because we have, thank goodness John didn't try to come in and we'd had to negotiate for some time. But what's the last thing you want to leave people with in regards to how we can fix this, how we can make this better as citizens as well as law enforcement?
Citizens need to make their voices heard. They need to change our political leadership. They need to engage. They need to engage. They need to engage with the police officers they do know. They need to support those police officers they do know who are good police officers, so they will feel more empowered to not only protect the community, but help point out those who aren't good police officers. And our political leaders need to do something to help and safeguard those officers who are willing to come forward and point out the inequities that are going on.
Joe, I'm going to let you answer that, and then we have one last question that has popped up, and then we've got to answer, and then we're going to go.
Okay, I agree totally with Marcel, but I'll take it a step further, and it goes back to what I just said. There are people within these confines that have the moxie, they've got the chops. They're just waiting for somebody to let them go. Mm-hmm. There are so many people out there that want to change. And again, I'll say the white, black, Hispanic, all of them. Everyone that actually has done some work knows who's not doing the work. One of the guys that just left was never a detective. And he's the chief of detectives. What are you going to...
Come on now.
Hey, let me give you this. This is my last thing. Yeah. Look at whose name was on all those reports. He's not a superintendent. What do you think he's going to do? That's all I want to know. What is he going to do? You read those reports. You know darn well what was in that video. Okay. Now, if he didn't speak up, he should have his butt for not having the balls to do it anyway.
Now, the last question we can address is, what about the recent video, and they're referring to, I think, the young man's Ronald Johnson's video, and no charges. Now, I saw the video myself. Actually, I posted it on my Facebook page. My problem was, and I don't have the best vision anyway, but it was really hard for me to see what I saw them shooting him. I saw him getting shot, and I saw him running prior to being shot, but I couldn't see if anything was in his hand or not. Now, my host before, which is the Roman on the Drive at 5, was saying that if you're running that fast, you can't run like he was running and hold a gun. I haven't run for anything in quite some time, so I don't
you
know.
can tell I'm not running. But okay.
So I don't
running
know.
for the dinner plate, but
As someone who's chased someone with a gun,
yes.
they can run fast, and they can run even faster without dropping that gun.
Okay.
Okay, that's
So-
I saw the video, but let me say this about the video and
Yeah.
be very clear about this. They recovered a weapon, were able to take off DNA. Now here's the thing: you can't fake DNA.
right.
Now you can say all the conspiracy stuff you want. Those officers, and let me backtrack. I would never. I've been in a shooting. See, I've been on both sides of the table. I've been an investigator. I've been in a shooting. So my perspective is a little bit different than most because you got one side that's this way and one side is that way. Well, I've been in both, and I can tell you, in those few seconds, you've got to make a decision that God Himself really don't want you to make. Now, do I think this guy, without going any further, from what I saw, they recovered weapons, they recovered bullets with his prints on it, and DNA off the gun. They also showed the gun with the grass, where he threw it in the grass, it fell where he fell, and that's where the grass is in. I mean, so everything adds up, at least for now. But the problem that you have is because you got a McDonald going on, everything's going to be looked at twice as hard, and I agree with that.
Yeah.
But based on what I've seen so far, I can't see the charges.
Okay. The question, because I know when we were watching it at work, the question was, once he had run past so many officers, why did this particular officer shoot? Because that's always the question, again, like the McDonald video. Why are 5 officers standing here or chasing or whatever they're doing, and only one sees fit to shoot?
You want to handle that?
Yeah, you can't. Everybody is not in the same frame of mind as
Right.
these things happen. Some others, maybe everyone didn't see the gun. Others, maybe they were inexperienced, and you see them freeze up all the time. And not part of being a police officer is being willing to make quick decisions.
Yes.
Quick 1-second decisions. Everybody can't do it on the same time frame. Everybody, believe it or not, is not equipped,
Yes.
even though they wear the uniform, to do it. Again, personal experience. I fought over my gun with someone. Afterwards, all the old timers saying, "Why didn't you kill him?"
And that was just what that was.
Right. And I fought for my life, but I didn't kill him. So you have to make split decisions on whether to use deadly force or not. And I can't speak for this officer, but he assessed the situation and decided it was necessary. And if everything is true, what we've been told, his actions were within department guidelines.
One more thing, Joe, because I know I'd asked you about it when we were talking earlier. People don't know what is standard equipment in Chicago that officers have to carry.
Okay.
Can you all please tell the people, because the question has come up, what about a taser? And I was thinking, I'm like, I don't know who's using tasers and who isn't, because people are assuming now across the board everybody has a taser and everybody has a body cam and everybody has this and that. What is standard police issue? When I go out,
Okay.
when I go out on the street, what do I have to have on?
Well, 2 things. First of all, there is no issue with the department. We buy everything. The state police
Wait,
are
you
issue.
said-
Hold on.
right? You sound like probation. We got to buy that stuff.
We got to buy everything.
That's right.
So the standard policeman